found the storage unit key on a Tuesday in March, wedged between a tube of chapstick and a crumpled CVS receipt at the bottom of my wife's winter coat pocket. I almost threw it away. It was one of those small brass keys with a plastic orange cap, the kind you see at U-Haul or public storage. Nothing remarkable about it. I'd been going through her things slowly, one box at a time, one drawer at a time, the way you do when you're not really ready to do it, but you know the longer you wait, the harder it gets. My daughter had offered to come help. I told her I needed to do it alone. My wife, Lorraine, had been gone for 4 months by then. A stroke. Fast and without warning, the way her doctor said was the merciful kind, though I've never found a way to agree with that. We'd had dinner the night before. She'd made her chicken and dumplings, the recipe her mother gave her when we first got married. We watched the news. She complained about her feet being cold. I fell asleep on the couch before 10, the way I always do, and she must have covered me with the blanket from the armchair because I woke up with it on me. She was gone before the ambulance got there. 31 years of marriage. I was 58 years old, and I didn't know how to make coffee for one person. The key sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days before I paid attention to it. I kept walking past it, setting my mug next to it, moving it to make room for the mail. On the 4th day, I actually picked it up and looked at it properly. There was a small label on the orange cap. Someone had written on it in blue ink. Very small, very neat. Not Lorraine's handwriting. Or maybe it was, but a version of it I didn't recognize. Bay Area Climate Storage Unit 41. I didn't know we had a storage unit. In 31 years, I had never heard her mention one. I told myself there was probably a simple explanation. Maybe she'd rented it when her mother passed, back in 2019, to hold on to furniture she couldn't bring herself to sell. Maybe it was old files from her accounting work. She'd been self-employed for the last 12 years, kept meticulous records, the kind of person who never threw away a document if she thought she might need it someday. A storage unit full of filing boxes would have been completely in keeping with the woman I knew. I told myself that. I found the facility on a Thursday morning about 6 miles from our house, off the highway near the Home Depot we used to go to on weekends. Not hidden, not far. 6 miles from the house we shared, from the bed we slept in, from the kitchen table where we ate breakfast every morning for 3 decades. The woman at the front desk looked up my account. She clicked through something on her computer. She told me the unit had been rented in my wife's name since February of 2011. 14 years. The monthly fee was $87, and it had been paid by automatic bank transfer from an account I didn't recognize. I had to hold the edge of the counter. 14 years. I asked if she could tell me anything else. She said she couldn't, privacy policies, but she could tell me the last access date. She looked at her screen. September 14th, she said. Lorraine had her stroke on September 22nd. I drove to Unit 41 on autopilot. The facility was one of those long outdoor rows, orange metal doors, numbers painted in black above each one. My hands were steady. I don't know how. I got out of the car and I stood in front of the door for what felt like a long time. The highway noise was constant behind me. A truck went past. Someone 2 rows over was loading boxes into a minivan. I put the key in the lock. The door rolled up. The first thing I saw was a child's bicycle. Pink, with white handlebar streamers. One of the streamers had been torn half off and was hanging loose. The bicycle had training wheels still on it, and the training wheels had small princess stickers on them, faded from age but still visible. A pink helmet hung from the handlebars. It was sized for a child of maybe 5 or 6. Behind the bicycle was a shelving unit, the kind you get at Costco, wireframe, 3 tiers. On the top shelf were plastic storage bins, the clear kind, neatly labeled with masking tape and a black marker. 0 to 12 months, 12 to 24 months, 12 to 24 months, 2T, 3T, 4-5 years. Below those, on the second shelf, were books, picture books, board books, early readers, Goodnight Moon, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Charlotte's Web, a stuffed rabbit, gray and worn thin in the way stuffed animals get when they've been held too much. a small pair of red rain boots with frogs on them, a plastic tea set in a mesh bag. On the bottom shelf were two shoeboxes and a manila envelope with my name on it. Just my name. Nothing else. For Stuart. I sat down on the concrete floor of that storage unit and I did not move for a long time. I have been a composed man most of my life. I'm not someone who falls apart. I grew up in a household where my father believed that a man worked through things, processed them quietly, and kept moving. I've carried that with me, for better or worse. I sat through Lorraine's funeral without crying, and I'd been ashamed of it ever since, wondering what was wrong with me, wondering if I was in shock or if I'd simply stopped feeling somewhere along the way. Sitting on that cold concrete floor, looking at a pink bicycle and 31 years of a marriage, I thought I understood. I cried for the first time since she died. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light outside to shift. Long enough that my back ached when I finally stood up. I took the manila envelope and the two shoeboxes. I locked the unit behind me. I drove home slowly, both hands on the wheel, radio off. I made myself eat something before I opened anything. I don't know why. A kind of delay, I suppose. A few more minutes of not knowing. I heated up soup from a can and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking at the envelope sitting on the table. Then I sat down and I opened it. There were 9 pages, handwritten, in Lorraine's handwriting. Her real handwriting, the one I knew. Rounded letters, the way she pressed hard on the downstrokes, the small loops on her lowercase e's. She began the way she always began anything she wrote to me. Stuart. Just my name, the way she said it when she was being serious. Not Stu, the way she called me every other time. I have started this letter so many times. I have probably written 30 versions of it. In some of them, I was braver. I told you in person, at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning when we had time to talk it through. In every version where I told you in person, you looked at me the way I was most afraid of, and I couldn't finish. I know that's a cowardly thing to admit. I know this letter is the coward's version. But I need you to know everything, and I need to be able to say all of it without stopping. Her name is Ivy. She's 14 years old. I put the letter down. I stood up. I walked to the back door and stood there looking at the yard for a while. The bird feeder Lorraine always kept filled was empty. I'd been forgetting to fill it. I went back and kept reading. My wife had a younger sister, Deborah, 10 years younger. I'd met Deborah a handful of times over the years, at our wedding, at a Christmas, maybe 15 years ago, once briefly at their mother's funeral. Lorraine and Deborah had been largely estranged for most of our marriage, and when I asked about it early on, Lorraine said simply that Deborah made choices that were hard to be around. I accepted that. Families are complicated, and I'd learned not to push on the ones that caused her pain. What Lorraine hadn't told me was that Deborah had a daughter. Ivy was born in the spring of 2011 when Deborah was 26. The father was not in the picture. Deborah was using by then opioids and later other things. And Lorraine, who found out about the pregnancy when Deborah called her from a hospital in Fresno, made a choice. She told Deborah she would help. She found a placement through a private agency. She paid for it herself, from a savings account she'd opened years before in her own name. Money she'd set aside incrementally over the years from her accounting work. Money I never knew about, because she handled our finances, and I trusted her completely and never thought to ask. She paid for Ivy's foster placement, and then her placement in a private children's home in the East Bay, and then later an arrangement with a licensed foster family in Walnut Creek. She visited when she could. She brought things, the books, the bicycle. She made sure the people caring for Ivy knew there was someone paying attention, someone who would notice if something was wrong. She didn't tell me because she was afraid. She wrote about it plainly, without making excuses for herself. I was afraid you would say no. I was afraid if I asked you to help, you would say it wasn't our responsibility. I was afraid of what it would cost us, not just money, but everything else. And then I was afraid for so long that I didn't know how to go back and start the conversation. Every year that passed, it got harder. The longer I kept it, the more it felt like a betrayal. And the more it felt like a betrayal, the more impossible it felt to tell you. I've watched you for 31 years. I know who you are, and I think I have to believe that if I had been brave enough to tell you, you would have said yes. I think you would have opened the door wider, not closed it. That belief is what I'm leaving you with, because I can't leave you anything else. Ivy knows my name. She doesn't know yours. I've left that for you to decide. The second page had a name and phone number, a caseworker at Contra Costa County, and below that, a second number with just the word Ivy. The two shoeboxes were full of photographs, not originals, copies, printed at a drugstore from the look of them, the way you do when you want to keep something but don't want to take the only copy. Ivy at various ages, a small dark-haired baby in a pink hospital blanket, a toddler in the red frog boots, standing in a puddle and laughing, a gap-toothed kindergartner with a loose ponytail and a backpack too big for her, a girl of maybe 10 or 11 sitting cross-legged on a bed, reading a thick book, not looking at the camera. In some of them, Lorraine was there. Not many, maybe a dozen, but in a few. Sitting next to Ivy on a park bench, both of them eating ice cream. Standing behind her at what looked like a school recital, hands on Ivy's shoulders, looking down at the top of Ivy's head with an expression I recognized. The way she looked at our daughter when she was small. That specific kind of careful love. I sat with those photographs for a long time. I want to be honest about what I felt, because I think there's a temptation to make this neater than it actually was. I was angry. I was angry in a way that had no clean place to go. Not at someone who was there to receive it, not at something I could argue with. 31 years, 14 years of this, specifically. An account I didn't know about. A child I'd never been asked about. Decisions made without me, around me, in the spaces I wasn't paying attention to. The woman I had built my life with had kept an entire separate thread of it, and she had done it, by her own account, because she didn't trust me to respond the right way. That part stung the most. That she had known me for 31 years and been afraid to ask. I also thought about the bicycle, the princess stickers, the box labeled 0-12 months. Someone had gone and bought those things. Someone had shown up month after month, year after year, quietly making sure a little girl who had no one was not entirely without someone. My wife had done that, alone and imperfectly and at a cost to our marriage I'll never fully be able to calculate. But she had done it, and she had kept doing it for 14 years. I thought about that for a long time, too. I waited 2 weeks before I called the caseworker. I needed to think clearly, and grief doesn't make for clear thinking. I talked to my daughter, Melissa, our daughter, Lorraine's, and mine, 27 years old, living in Portland with her husband. I told her everything, the whole story, and I listened to the silence on the other end of the phone when I finished. "Dad," she said finally, "what are you going to do?" I told her I didn't know yet. I told her I needed to meet her first. Ivy. She's 14, Melissa said. She's a kid who's been in the system her whole life, and she just lost the only person who was showing up for her. She wasn't telling me to do anything. She was just saying what was true. I called the caseworker on a Monday morning. Her name was Patricia, and she had a matter-of-fact warmth that I found steadying. She told me that Ivy was aware her aunt had passed. She told me that Ivy's current foster placement was stable. She told me that Ivy knew, had been told by Lorraine at some point, that there was a husband and that the husband might reach out. She's been waiting, Patricia said. I asked if Ivy would be willing to meet. Patricia said she'd asked her that same question 2 months ago, the week after Lorraine died, just in case. She said yes, Patricia said. She's been saying yes since then. She didn't want to push, but yes. We met at a park in Walnut Creek on a Saturday morning in April. I got there early and sat on a bench near the entrance and watched people arrive with their dogs and their strollers and their coffee cups. I was wearing the blue jacket Lorraine had bought me for my birthday 3 years ago. I don't know why I chose it specifically, some instinct toward the right thing. Patricia brought her in a silver sedan. I recognized her immediately from the photographs, though she was taller than I'd imagined and thinner, with the careful posture of a kid who has learned to take up exactly as much space as is allotted to her. No more. Dark hair pulled back. A green hoodie. She was carrying a library book. She looked at me the way I imagine I was looking at her, like we were both trying to find something familiar. Patricia introduced us and then found a reason to stand back and give us room. Ivy sat down at the other end of my bench. There was maybe 3 feet between us. She talked about you, Ivy said. Not a question, not exactly. She didn't talk about you, I said. That was wrong, I'm sorry. She looked at the library book in her hands. She turned it over once. She said you'd say that. She was probably right about a lot of things. Yeah, Ivy said. She was pretty smart. We sat there for a while without talking. 2 sparrows were fighting over something near the trash can a few yards away. A man jogged past with a yellow Labrador. The morning was cool and bright, the kind of April morning in Northern California that makes you think everything might be all right. I don't need you to be anything, Ivy said. She said it carefully, like she'd rehearsed it, like she needed to establish this up front. I know you didn't know about me. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I'm not expecting anything. I looked at her for a moment. 14 years old. Carrying a library book to a meeting with a stranger. Telling me she didn't need me before I had the chance to disappoint her. I appreciate that, I said. But I'd like to try anyway, if you're open to it. I can't make any promises about what it looks like. I've never done this before, but I'd like to learn. She looked up at me then. Really looked. Something shifted in her face. Not relief exactly. More like the careful lowering of something she'd been holding up for a long time. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. We ended up walking around the park for about an hour. She told me she liked science, biology specifically. She was interested in marine biology. She told me she'd read Charlotte's Web about a dozen times. I told her that the copy in the storage unit was probably hers, and she said she'd wondered where it went. We talked about small things and easy things, and I let her lead. Before Patricia drove her back, Ivy stopped by the car door and turned around. I want to show you something, she said. She fished in the front pocket of her hoodie and came up with her phone, and she scrolled through it for a moment and then handed it to me. It was a photograph. Lorraine and Ivy, on that park bench from the pictures in the shoebox, ice cream cones in hand. But I hadn't seen this particular one before. In this one, Lorraine wasn't looking at Ivy. She was looking directly at the camera with that expression I knew so well from 31 years. The small private smile she made when she was exactly where she wanted to be. She took that one herself, Ivy said. She had a selfie stick. It was very embarrassing. I laughed. It came out rougher than expected. Yeah, I said. That sounds right. I handed the phone back. Ivy got in the car. I sat back down on the bench after they left, and I thought about Lorraine. I thought about the kitchen table version of this, the conversation she'd tried and failed to have 30 different ways. I thought about the Sunday morning that never came, and what I would have said if it had. I want to believe I would have said yes. I do believe that, but I also know that the man I was at 30 might have needed some convincing, and maybe Lorraine knew that too. Maybe she was right that it would have cost us something, for a while. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong about any of it, even as she was wrong about the most important thing. That I couldn't handle knowing. I could handle knowing. I just didn't get the chance. I'm handling it now. Ivy and I have been meeting every other Saturday for the past 3 months. Sometimes we go to the park. Last month, I took her to the California Academy of Sciences in San Francisco, and she spent 40 minutes at the Coral Reef exhibit explaining to me things I did not know about symbiotic relationships between species. I took notes on my phone because I didn't want to forget. She thought that was funny. My daughter Melissa came down from Portland last month and met her. They texted each other before they met, which I found out afterward, which I suppose I should have expected given that Melissa is 27 and apparently everyone under 40 does things I don't fully understand. It went fine, better than fine. They went to lunch without me, which I thought was a good sign. The paperwork is ongoing. Patricia and a family attorney I hired in May are working through what a formal arrangement might look like. Guardianship, or something further along if Ivy is open to it and if it's what she wants. That's not something I'm pushing. It's something we're talking about slowly, in the way that things like this need to be talked about. There's a lot I'll never get back. 14 years of birthdays. The first time she learned to ride that pink bicycle, whatever made her laugh at 5 years old and 6 years old and 8 years old and 10. All of that happened without me, and it can't be retrieved. But she's here now. She's real and she's here. And she has Lorraine's way of going quiet when she's thinking something through, and she reads constantly. And she's interested in how things work, and she told me last Saturday that the empty bird feeder in my backyard was distressing to her, and would I please fill it? I bought a 20-pound bag of sunflower seeds on the way home. The feeder was full by Sunday morning. I think about what Lorraine wrote at the end of her letter, the last paragraph, which I've read enough times now that I know it without looking. I know I took the easy way out. I know that by the time you read this, I won't be there to answer for it. And that's not fair to you. It was never fair to you. But I want you to know that the whole time, the entire 14 years, I believed in you. Not the version of you I was afraid of, but the real one, the man you actually are. I was just too scared to let him prove me right. I'm sorry I never gave you the chance. I'm giving it to you now. I hope it's not too late. It's not too late. I don't know exactly what we're building, Ivy and I. I don't know what she'll call me someday, if she calls me anything at all. I don't know what a 14-year-old girl who has spent her whole life being careful about needing people is going to make of a 58-year-old man who is still learning how to make coffee, for one. But I know she texted me on Tuesday to ask if I'd ever seen a documentary about octopus cognition. And I said no, and she sent me a link and said I should watch it before Saturday. I watched it that night. I have thoughts. She's going to hear all of them. That's a start. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any grand or cosmic sense, just in the plain, practical way that a man in his late 50s starts to think when the life he assumed he understood turns out to have had a whole other layer running beneath it. Lorraine made a choice. She made it out of fear, and out of love, and out of a kind of exhausted courage that I've had to sit with for a long time before I could call it what it was. She wasn't a perfect woman. She kept something from me that she had no right to keep, and it cost both of us something we can never get back. But she also showed up for a child that nobody asked her to show up for. She did it quietly, consistently for 14 years, without recognition, without anyone telling her she was doing the right thing. She did it because she decided that was who she was going to be. That matters. How a person decides who they're going to be, and then actually becomes that person, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's expensive, even when it's lonely, that's the whole thing, I think. That's the whole game. I was angry at her for a while. I want to be honest about that, because I think it's the honest version of this story. Anger is easy to dress up as something more dignified, but underneath it was just hurt. She hadn't trusted me with the most important decision she ever made. And the question I kept coming back to, the one that kept me up at 3 in the morning more times than I can count, was whether she was right not to trust me. Whether the man I was at 30 or 40 or even 50 would have handled it the way I'm handling it now. I don't have a clean answer. I'd like to think I would have. But I've lived long enough to know that who we are under pressure is a different person than who we imagine ourselves to be in the quiet of our own heads. Lorraine knew me well enough to be afraid. That's something I've had to reckon with. What I've landed on is this: the fear was real, the mistake was real, and the love underneath both of those things was also real. All three can be true at once. That's not a contradiction. That's just what people are like. And Ivy, she spent 14 years being careful about needing anyone. That kind of self-protection doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from learning, early and repeatedly, that the people who are supposed to stay don't always stay. She had every reason to walk into that park and keep her walls up, and instead, she sat down next to a stranger and said, quietly, that she wasn't expecting anything. That kind of dignity in a 14-year-old girl stopped me cold. I'm not going to stand here and tell you I saved anyone. I didn't. She was already who she was going to be before I showed up. All I did was show up. And maybe that's the simplest version of the lesson here, that showing up, even late, even imperfectly, even when it's hard to know what you're supposed to say or do or be, is still worth something. It's not nothing. It might actually be everything. The bird feeder is full. She reminded me to fill it, and I did. And that's where we are. That's enough for now.